Hi, welcome to Life in the Bottle, Season 3, Episode 21. I am Kyle, and I am joined this week by Lyle Railsback of Railsback Frere. Lyle, thanks for hanging out, man.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. It's good to see you. It's been a quick minute between the pandemic and your worldly travels now. You're out in California.
Out in California, we had an event up at the winery on Sunday. My brother had a bunch of clients up there. I've been working the market in Los Angeles, San Diego yesterday, heading to Sacramento later today. So just making the rounds.
Mildly busy.
Yeah.
So we are here to talk about our latest. Can we call it a collaboration? I don't know how much collaborating was done other than you graciously offered us the opportunity to put our label on a custom blend. And that is this guy here.
Yeah, it looks great, man. The label we came out with, I really like the single fish.
I think it's fun. It's a fun little like riff on the OG label. It still pays, credit where credit is due and harkens back to the Mediterranean and Provence and Lulu. How do you pronounce that? Is it Rascasses?
Rascasses.
Rascasses. Okay. Yeah, never been good at
the scorpion fish.
Yes. Awesome. So you guys have been making your Rascasses for almost 6 years now, I think, right?
Yeah, the 2020 vintage is our sixth harvest together. Eric and I started in 2015, and prior to that, Eric had a label that he had started in Santa Barbara County called Blue Tea, which was Loire Valley varietals, Sauvignon Blanc, Chenin Blanc, Melon, Cabernet Franc. I was working for French importer Kermit Lynch, traveling all over France, and really the project Railsback Frere was kind of a synthesis of everything we had learned over the last decade in Provence and along the Mediterranean and the island of Corsica. So we started the project just to make rosé. It's now expanded over 6 years, and we have 10 different wines that we're doing now. But really, we started making wine together as Railsback Frere, Railsback Brothers, just for our love of good dry rosé.
Awesome. So you come from, how did you get your start? You most recently worked for Kermit Lynch, and now you're pretty much dived into Railsback Frere full time. But where did you come into the wine world?
Yeah, I worked in restaurants. I cooked my way through college, fell in love with food and cooking, and went to college in the Willamette Valley in Oregon, and fell in love with wines there, and got into Pinot Noir from the Willamette Valley, and was really on the food side, and had gone to Europe on a student trip, came back and tried to get a job as a line cook, and this restaurant in the Willamette Valley had posted a job offering, and they filled the job and said, we don't need a line cook anymore, but we need a sommelier. And despite the fact that I was 20 years old and didn't really know anything about wine, they hired me, and it's just been sort of down the rabbit hole ever since. I worked in restaurants for 10 years, both back of the house, cooking, and front of the house, bussing, running food, waiting tables, eventually being a sommelier, doing wine programs, and worked around Portland and the Willamette Valley, and also San Francisco briefly. And then I also worked in wine retail. I think probably this amount working in retail. I think that people who aren't in the industry, Kyle, maybe don't know that as in a retail shop, especially a good one like Ancona's, sometimes you're tasting 100 wines a day. And so I was doing this at E&R Wine Shop in Portland, Oregon. They were Kermit's largest customer north of San Francisco. And my boss would go to France every year and put together containers of Kermit wine. And so I really sort of got into that side of things. And then later Kermit offered me a job, and I spent 12 years with Kermit. It was an amazing ride. I learned a lot, but doing Railsback Frere and sort of taking what we had learned from the south of France and from some of the best growers in the Rhone and Provence and Corsica, it's been amazing to sort of apply some of that to Santa Barbara County. So we're really excited with what's happening out here.
Awesome. And that's like my perfect segue. Why there? Why where you guys are? Why Santa Barbara?
Yeah, it's Santa Barbara County, Santa Ynez Valley. It's one of the few transverse valleys in North America, a valley that runs east to west. So It's also tucked up a little in the hills. It gets direct breezes from the Pacific Ocean. So if you look at a map and you see Santa Barbara, it's close to LA. It's way further south than Napa or Sonoma. You would sort of I had imagined it to sort of be a warmer climate, but the reverse is true. It's actually one of the coldest climates, and can really, because of this ocean breeze and this diurnal shift, greater temperature difference between night and day, you can really create these wines with freshness and with snap and lower alcohol, higher acidity wines that we like to drink, kind of wines more suited for the table. So yeah, with rosé, we're picking on the earlier side. We are working with Mediterranean varietals, which helps. So the rosé is a blend of Mourvedre and Grenache, Cinsault, coming from two different vineyards, one of which we've worked with for 6 years, which is called the Camp 4 Vineyard. It's on marine sedimentary loam, and that's where the Mourvedre and Grenache came from this year. The Cinsault came from another site called Nolan Ranch, which is really rocky, super diverse soil types, maybe 30 different types of soil in the same vineyard. And the clusters were a lot smaller, so the fruit was pretty concentrated. I think 2020, it's for just doing this for 6 years, I think this is certainly our best rosé that we've been lucky to make yet.
Awesome. That's super exciting, man. Yeah, I feel like you think Southern California and you think, oh wow, like Santa Barbara is kind of close to Mexico, and like you'd think that the closer you got to the equator, the warmer it would be. But geography is a funny thing, man. It's funny. How often I find myself mentioning diurnal shifts in these videos is funny, because that's like so many of the wines that excite us and really get us going come from these places where the winemaker is able to harness that, where they're getting this beautiful ripeness, but they're also retaining such aromatic quality to the wine and such acidity and freshness. So it's kind of that best of both worlds, where you're getting the sugar you need to get the weight and the body of the wine that you're targeting without it being super heavy, but you're also managing to keep all of those levels and layers of complexity that make wines like this really what they are. You guys, when you make the Rascasses for the Railsback Frere straight label, you guys are Mourvedre heavy in the blend?
So yeah, it changes every year. So we've some vintages we had no Mourvedre. When we first began the first year, 2015, the Mourvedre that we found was too expensive, and we didn't want to have a $45 rosé. So we made a red wine out of the Mourvedre, and it turned out really well. So that was kind of the impetus for us to start making other wines than just rosé. But yeah, this for the 2020 harvest overall for rosé for us, it was we kind of had equal parts Mourvedre, Grenache, and Cinsault. I know Cody sort of when we tasted barrel samples, this was back in January. Cody was excited about a different proportion than we're doing. So yeah, it's all cool for us. But we like Cinsault a lot. Cinsault is something that it's rare to see single varietal of Cinsault wine. So I think people don't really know it. Or they don't know how to pronounce it, being spelled Cinsault. But Cinsault is very, so it's a variety that has good acidity and freshness. It's used a lot in rosé. Other people use it in red blends, but we've used Cinsault before. But this newer sourcing in the 2020 harvest, the Cinsault came from Nolan Ranch, and we're super excited about this vineyard. It is a younger vineyard, so this was just, I think, 8 years fresh vines. So, but I think sometimes young vines, people talk a lot about old vines and making more complex wines. This is certainly not untrue, but I think that for young, fresh, fruity wines, which rosé is in the category of, sometimes young vines can produce really fruity, delicious flavors out of the gate. And so for what we're doing for really juicy, drinkable Carignan, and for rosé that you're going to be drinking within the first few years of its life, there's nothing wrong with younger vines.
We're going to get into the rosé. I'm going to stick my nose in this glass in a minute here and kind of taste through it while you sit there and watch me, because it's 7:30 in the morning in California. But
Yeah.
I'm just sitting here with it on the desk in front of me. I keep getting like this beautiful wafts of just these all different aromas, and the common theme throughout everything is that beautiful salty saline mineral, which it's perfect. It's exactly what we want from this kind of wine. If we're going to talk about this one, we're a little bit Sanso heavy on this specific blend because Cody was, like you said, really jazzed on the Sanso that he had tasted with you guys. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys make the wine, how you, or why you choose to make wine the way you do, basically?
Yeah, from the very beginning when we started making rosé together, we called it Rascasses because the scorpion fish, our sort of hero and mentor, at least in Provence, was Lulu Perraud, who was the proprietress of Domaine Tempier. Her maiden name was Lulu Tempier. She just passed away last year at the ripe age of 102 and lived a really full, amazing life. We had the opportunity to visit her every year in Provence and sit around her table and have lunch with her. And she was like 4'3", this like little beacon of energy and light, and would tell us dirty jokes in French. And Lulu, if there were, she'd walk into the room, and if there were bottles of water on the table, she would sort of make jokes about it and say, you know what fish do in that? And, so it's kind of funny. She didn't even drink rosé. Her whole life, she only drank young red wine, and she every day would have 2 glasses of young red wine. And she says this is probably what kept her going for so long. But they, of course, Domaine Tempier is known as making one of the best rosés on planet Earth. Definitely the sort of inspiration for most people who are making or drinking rosé. The style that they were doing back in the 70s when Kermit discovered them was direct to press rosé. So grapes taken right from the vineyard directly to the press, a sort of delicate pressing with lighter color wine, aged in wood. So they were aging rosé in foudre, large barrels that were neutral wood, allowing a malolactic fermentation, a secondary fermentation, to get this sort of creamier, rounder mouthfeel. And they were only using native yeast. So some of those things have changed at Domaine Tempier just because of the size of the winery now, and certainly the winemaker Daniel Rabier, who's amazing, believes that with climate change, they want to have less mallow. They sort of want to have partial mallow and block it halfway through to keep some malic acidity and more tension. So they have maybe partial mallow today, and they are inoculating with a neutral yeast. But they don't use wood anymore. They use stainless steel. Domaine Tempier is still delicious, so just a different style. And so for us, it was more kind of interesting from a historical standpoint to go back to what we thought, Tempier was doing in the 70s, and kind of the rosé that turned Kermit onto rosé, and the first rosé that turned Americans onto drinking dry rosé from France. So we do everything in neutral wood at Railsback Freres. And we allow full mallow, and nothing's ever inoculated. So we only use native, wild, indigenous yeast. So a lot of the flavor there is stuff that's just existing from the different vineyard sites and the grapes. And I think we're really blessed with 2020. This harvest this year was very warm. There were 2 heat spikes in the summer. I'm sure everyone's aware of the crazy fires that happened in California last year. We were really blessed to be in this Transverse Valley and this one little pocket that was kind of avoided any of the smoke and fires. After the wines were completed, we sent everything to a lab for testing just to be sure that there was no smoke taint, and because the wines tasted great, but everything came back super clean, and we were just really blessed to be in this Transverse Valley and with the ocean breezes. So kind of dodged a bullet there.
Awesome. I mean, especially last year being what it was for winemakers all up and down the United States West Coast. I feel like take whatever you can get, man. We have a couple of winemakers that we love to work with, Kelly Fox being one of them, who wasn't able to make any red wine last year, and she's up in the Willamette. She made no skin contact wine. She's got a light rosé, and she made a Blanc de Noir because she had all this beautiful Pinot Noir and nothing to do with it. So the fact that you guys were able to get a squeaky clean wine out of that vintage is remarkable, and we are very happy to have it. So if I'm gonna jump in this glass a little bit here, real quick.
Yeah, it's almost lunchtime there, so you should be drinking rosé.
So let's I'm gonna real quick just. I feel
I'll
like
drink coffee,
that
so you're not alone.
What's that?
You're drinking coffee just so you don't feel like you're alone.
I appreciate that. I feel like it's got this beautiful floral stone fruit kind of tart peachy thing that comes right out. There's some grapefruit peel. There's some like just ripe wild strawberries on the nose. But like the biggest thing that I mentioned before is that like that crushed seashell, salty sea spray, brininess, and that super bright material that just comes through all of those aromas and carries the whole thing. It's so pretty. On the palate, I think it's got a beautiful tartness, but you're letting that full malolactic fermentation complete in the wine. My mouth is watering as I'm sitting here tasting this. Um, so it's definitely not shy on acidity, but it's not glaring and it's not harsh because that mallow just adds this beautiful pillowy softness that kind of rounds everything out a little bit. It's got again on the finish that briny kind of salty thing. It reminds me of like some herb marinated green olive kind of thing. It's like a really interesting complexity that carries through the finish that we don't see in a lot of rosé outside of the higher end offerings from Provence and things of that nature.
Thanks, man. Yeah, thanks for saying that. It's we talk a lot about the marine influence in the wines and that sort of sensation of salinity or saltiness. It's yeah, for us, we love that. It makes the wines really exciting, especially at the table. It's almost like having a salt shaker, and all the food tastes better because your wine's a little bit salty. And yeah, I think we were last year during the pandemic, we were like super deep on Zoom tastings. For me, one of the turning points was when we had a tasting with Daniel Ravier, who's the winemaker for Tempier, and he told the whole group that was on the tasting, sort of, without any prompting. I don't know if people know Rascasses and Railsback Freres, but this is some like really delicious wine. A good example of rosé being made in California, and it was like, wow, fanboy moment. Like, here's one of my favorite winemakers and favorite people. Yeah, so we're humbled with that. We really like kind of where the rosé has gone. We've definitely learned something each year, and the wine's gotten better. And yeah, we're really happy with where 2020 is. I do think though that if people have the space and ability to do so, taking a bottle, I know Cody's really good at this, Kyle, I'm assuming you are, but taking a bottle or two and hiding it in the back of your closet or your cellar and forgetting about it. The 2018 rosé is still tasting super fresh for us because of this secondary fermentation, this malolactic. The wines hold up a lot better with time. We think they drink better after a year. It's of course, it drinks good now on release. It's still delicious and fresh and creamy, but I think adding another year of cellar aging is also interesting. You get more of the salinity of the wine, you get more of the taste of the place, and less the taste of the fruit over time.
Awesome. What I have a million pairings running through my head, and I'm sure as a food guy, there are a few things that jump right out to you. What are your go-tos for a rosé like this?
Yeah, my wife Victoria James wrote a book on rosé called Drink Pink, and I did the illustrations for her. And so we spent a lot of time writing vigneron in France and Italy, and people like Jacques Pepin and Alice Waters asking for recipes and recommendations. And some of the things that we put in the book were just some of our favorite things for rosé are just the simplest. So, you know, little bread with really good butter and French radishes and fleur de sel, like 4 ingredients. But you have that with rosé and just the snap of the fresh radishes and the creaminess of the butter and, of course, the salt. So it's like anchovies on toast. Rosé is amazing for salads. People don't think about salad pairings. It doesn't sound maybe as sexy, but honestly, I think one of the magical things about good rosé is that it can go with vegetables and harder to pair things. Some of the green flavors you have because of this like phenolic flavor in rosé and this almost sensation of bitterness when you have that with artichokes, asparagus, a green salad, anchovies, garlic, all those things. Rosé can be really magical with that. So if I'm having a salad at home or like a goat cheese salad, especially, rosé is going to be the first thing we open.
I'm with you on that. It's one of those things that because it kind of falls in that gray area between a white wine and a red wine, it just kind of increases its flexibility. There's no limit to what you can pair with, especially different styles of rosé. I drink this and my head immediately goes to where I want to be drinking it, and I want this looking at the water, eating a bunch of seafood, whether it's a raw bar, or fish on papillote. I had this picture before of fish on papillote with fennel and olives and orange, and I was like, "Ooh, that's going in the tasting note."
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think you mentioned fennel, and obviously, like you start to think of Provençal flavors, and I guess one of the best rules for pairing any food and wine is kind of the age-old idea that what grows together goes together. Obviously, in Santa Ynez, we don't have a long culinary history, perhaps Spanish food, but thinking about our wine being styled in the way of Provençal wines, and you look at the food of Provence, which is very vegetable heavy, very fish heavy. And you think about things like wild fennel growing all over the roads there, and I think about fennel and I think about rosé automatically.
Awesome. Well, you guys are crushing it with these wines. We've had them on the shelf here for a good handful of years, I think, and longer than I've been here. And every vintage that I've seen you guys put out, especially since being at Ancona's, it's not that it gets better and better, but you see the evolution of the wines as they come out, and they're always delicious. But I'm really excited to see what you guys continue to do. It's been awesome to work with you. So cheers. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man. We really appreciate you guys supporting us ever since the beginning, and it was awesome to do this special project with you guys this year. So thanks so much. I hope people enjoy drinking it. When I'm back in Connecticut next week, I'm gonna have to come by and grab a bottle myself. So see you soon.
Sounds good, man. Look forward to pulling a cork. We'll catch you soon. Thanks for tuning in.